All right, we'll go ahead and call to order the Stevensville Town Council meeting for Thursday, October 28th, 2021. Ms. Berthoud, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Allen?
Here.
Councilmember Devlin?
Here.
Councilmember Ludington?
Here.
Councilmember Wandler? Here. Mayor Dewey?
Here. If you'd please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Janelle, just go ahead and just show the screen. For those of you joining us on the live stream this evening, our camera seems to be having some technical difficulties with a power source. So you will still be able to listen to the meeting and you'll be able to view the screen with us. You just unfortunately won't be able to see what's going on in the room. We apologize for that. But moving on in the agenda, we're at the portion for public comment from citizens that on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Please step forward, state your name and address for the record. Okay, hearing no public comment, we'll move into approval of the minutes. We have the 10/14/2021 meeting minutes for council's consideration this evening.
Page 3, Chief Motley's report on the last sentence. It says, "We are trying to be very fiscally responsible with our dollars at the fire department, and we appreciate," it says everyone, but I'm pretty sure he means everything that we get. Did he say everyone? Every $1 that we get? Okay. Oh, it's 2 words. Every one, 2 separate words. With that, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Ludington and seconded by Ms. Wandler to approve the meeting minutes for October 14th. Any further council discussion? Any public comment? All right, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Ms. Berthoud?
Councilmember Allen?
Aye.
Councilmember Devlin?
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington?
Aye.
And Councilmember Wandler?
Aye. Thank you. Council has claims 17085 through 17113.
Claim number 17100, Western Building Center, a Milwaukee fuel chainsaw. We buy a new chainsaw for trimming trees.
I believe that the fire department replaced one of their gas chainsaws with a electric version
Oh, okay.
for roof cutting.
So that was for the fire department.
Let me find it here. No, it's coded to, well, one of them is, yes, the chainsaw is coded to fire suppression.
Okay.
The other item,
okay. Yeah, I see it there.
The other item there was for public works.
Right.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the claims?
I'll make a motion to approve claims 17085 through 17113.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Allen and seconded by Mr. Ludington to approve claims 17085 through 17113. Any further council discussion or questions? Public comment. Ms. Barker.
C. Barker, 104 Winslet. What is Taz Properties claim number 17107 for $300?
It's our office lease for the airport.
Thank you.
Is there any further public comment on the claims? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. Ms. Berthoud?
Councilmember Allen?
Aye.
Councilmember Devlin?
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington?
Aye.
And Councilmember Wandler?
Aye. Okay, that motion passes unanimously with a hop, skip, and a jump. We'll move right into new business. Discussion decision on the 2021 revised preliminary engineering report. Mr. Capera is here from HDR Engineering to review some updates to the PER, just to kind of give you a lay of the land of why this is coming forward again. If you recall, you were provided with a preliminary engineering report and approved that report when an ARPA application was due back in July. There was a lot of comment we heard from the public and throughout the community that report and our grant application didn't do enough to address leakage. That was a grave concern for the members of our community. So we went back after we had filed that application, and Craig will cover the results of what that looked like, but we went back and did some revisions and focused a little bit more on leakage. So the results of those conversations internally within the administration and with HDR is what you're hearing tonight. So Craig has a presentation to review with you folks, and we'll engage in some dialogue as to what some priorities should look like from the town council's perspective. So Craig, it's been a while since you've been to a meeting. We've changed some things. Make sure you speak into the microphone or the folks online won't hear you.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
We're rolling tonight here. As Brandon said, and hopefully you recall, back in June I came down and presented the draft water utility preliminary engineering report to you guys and requested that we have your approval to proceed forward with a ARPA grant application, and you gave us that approval, and we proceeded forward with an application to the program. We were not successful in receiving competitive grant money for the water system at that time. The state awarded $125 million in competitive grant money. They limited the competitive grant amount to $2 million. Originally, they had $25 million in there as the maximum amount, and they limited that, which was good, I think, for everybody. Most water system projects did not get funding, and if you didn't have serious health and safety problems with your system, you didn't rank in the money. And a health and safety problem would be, if you had a boil order or had contamination in your system of some sort where you had a violation from DEQ, then you likely ranked and got grant money for it. The good news is the town of Stevensville doesn't have any issues like that, and that's a good thing. The town of Stevensville water system did rank 83rd. They funded the first 75, so we were very close. So that gives us a lot of hope that in round two, so that was round one, 125 million. Round two is underway right now. They started receiving grant applications on October 5th. That goes through January 14th. So if we want to reapply for round two competitive grant money, we have to have an application in by January 14th. They're going to fund approximately another $125 million worth of competitive grants. The good news is you're not, most of the systems that had serious health and safety risks got funded the first time around. So that part of it maybe isn't going to be quite as drastic. And I'm probably getting ahead of myself a little bit. So what I plan on talking to you guys about is the preliminary engineering report update that we're working on. We talk about storage, a more robust leakage evaluation and leak reduction project prioritization. And then I think later in the agenda, or next on the agenda, is talk about the ARPA funding program again, and then next steps. So if you go to the next slide. So as Brandon said, we presented the draft preliminary engineering report to you guys back in June, received a lot of public comment, and that public comment really revolved around needing to emphasize more in the report about resolving the leakage issues in the system. And if you recall, the system has a significant amount of leakage. So what we did to update the preliminary engineering report, and I'll show you a little bit more on this, we went back and further analyzed the leakage of the system and developed a prioritized list of projects, water main replacement projects, to address that. So we took leak history, we took the leak study reports that have been done, we took pipe age and pipe size, overlaid all those things in GIS, and developed, I guess, what I would call a heat map to try to identify where the real issues in the system are. And if we go to the next slide, and this is going to be really hard to see, and I apologize for that, and we can get this out to folks. Yeah, this is difficult. We'll get this to folks, but if you look at the map, what we did, and there's little white triangles where the town staff, maintenance crews went out and fixed leaks over the last 3 years. And then there's little dots, and they're hard to see, but every place where your leak detection contractor came out and listened for leaks in the system, and there was a report that was developed that said, okay, here's what we've concluded or found. There's places where they determined there seemed to be a really significant leak. There's places that they were moderate. There's places where they heard things but it was minor. We put all those things in here, and we developed a heat map. So the one thing that you can see that's probably the most important thing to see on this graphic is the heat map part of it. So the places that you see where you've got this kind of pink shading is kind of where all of that stuff comes together, and we've got small diameter pipe that's really old, that's experienced leaks that have had to be fixed, and where the leak detection crews heard stuff that is likely leakage in the system. So what we did, if we go to the next slide, is we developed priorities for where we think that the town should focus on replacing mains and service lines to address that. So if you look at this figure, the pipelines that are highlighted in green are priority 1. The pipelines that are highlighted in yellow are priority 2, and then the pipelines that are highlighted in kind of a pink red are priority 3. So where the most leak fixes, soundings, small diameter pipe, old pipe, where all that kind of really comes together the most is on Pine Street. So that's Pine Street. And then the next one is over here on Mission Street. So we determined that, okay, that's priority 1. And then likewise, you go to, I guess you got College Street and Buck Street are next. And then Main Street, and then there's a couple of tie-ins on 2nd and 4th that we kind of tied in with that. Now you can arrange these, in any magnitude that you want. Like if you had enough money, you could just go fix the whole thing all at once, right? But we've got to marry that with the funding that's available and the grant program that we're going after funding on, and try to fit all that into a program. So we've taken a first cut at that, and I'm going to show you what that looks like tonight. We've taken a first cut at it, and then I think there's going to be some iterations to get to the point where we're all in agreement and happy with the program that we're going to move forward with regard to the grant program and what you're going to spend town funds on. So let's go to the next slide here. So this is the project priority and estimated project cost for all of those things. So in the last preliminary engineering report, there was a lot in there about storage, and in the past, in the previous water system programs that have been completed for the city, there was phase 1, 2, 3, 4 water system improvements. Phase 1, 2, 3 had been completed. Phase 4 was there to build a new water tank for the town of Stevensville. And you guys have been putting money in the bank and preparing to do that project. There was a lot in the PER that we did that revolved around that. The existing tank, if you recall, it's old. It appears to have a significant amount of leakage. We were going to completely replace that tank with a new tank. Given the public comment and the focus on, well, let's try to fix what we have, reduce the leakage that we have, and go forward with that. What we're looking at doing is condition assessment on the existing tank, and we have people that are experts in going into concrete tanks and doing condition assessment and looking at how do we repair this to stop leakage and extend its useful life. So we're recommending that the town do that. And then I've got a placeholder in here for existing tank rehabilitation. We've thrown a $300,000 number at that. That could vary widely. So once we do the condition assessment, we'll be coming back to you guys and saying, all right, this is what we really think you could do. And it could be anything from, forget it, we need to build a new tank there, demolish what you have, or it might be, we think you can repair this for $50,000, not $300,000. So it's a placeholder, keep that in mind. And then, the new tank, we do need more storage. We need more storage to meet the fire flow requirements that the town has, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the ARPA grant program and kind of the intricacies of that and what we want to try to do with regard to what we use town funds for and what we go for grant money for. So what I've done here in the PER, the previous PER, we planned on building a completely new tank and mothballing the existing tank, taking it out of service. The new tank was going to be 1 million gallons. That's a $1.5 million project. Now what we're saying is if we can refurbish the existing tank, keep it in service, it's around 400,000 gallons. We need another 600,000 gallon tank. So the new tank now, the cost of that has come down significantly. Now we're saying 900,000. Again, that's an estimate. There's some work to be done to figure that out, which probably the biggest thing is doing a site analysis and figuring out exactly where we're going to put that tank, what the property is going to cost you. Is it an elevated tank? Is it a steel tank? Is it a concrete tank? Lots of things to figure out. We'll talk about that some more here in a minute too. Another thing that was in the PER was SCADA system improvements. We've kept that, carried that forward. That's important. And then we've added the priority 1 projects, or the phase 1 projects that I showed you from the leak analysis before, which is Pine Street and Mission Street. That gives us a total, what I'm calling phase 1 project cost of about $2.6 million. And then we rolled in phase 2, phase 3. We can rearrange this however you like, and we'll keep working on it. But College Street, Buck Street in phase 1, phase 2, Main Street, and then the 2 cross connectors, West 2nd, West 4th Street. And the related costs there, about $900,000 for phase 2, close to $900,000 for phase 3. And we're just trying to kind of break them out so they're even going forward. And like I said, there's some discussion to be had on that. Let's go to the next slide. So in summary, the preliminary engineering report update that we're currently working on, and we'll be coming back to you guys with, further evaluates and prioritizes the leak reduction and the water main and water tank renewal and replacement in response to public comment and a desire for the community to really focus on those things first. So that's in there. And then again, the potential for rehabilitation of the existing tank and reducing the size of the new tank. So those are the main updates in the preliminary engineering report that you'll see when we get a draft back to you. So I think that kind of ends the update with regard to the preliminary engineering report. So I guess we'll open it up to questions, comments.
Craig, do you still want us to approve these updates this evening, or are you willing to hold off on that until you actually have a draft in front of the council?
So this kind of ties into the grant program. One of the criteria in the grant program is readiness to proceed, and part of that is having an approved preliminary engineering report and submitting a preliminary engineering report to DEQ for them to review and approve. I kind of feel like it's maybe unfair to you guys to ask you to approve this without me having, set it on your desk so you can actually look at it. There really isn't a lot that's changed other than the things that we've outlined here. If you feel comfortable saying, yeah, we're good with it, let's get it submitted to DEQ, what I would do is get you guys a draft of that preliminary engineering report at the same time we'll get a copy sent to DEQ for their review and approval. If not, it can probably wait a little bit because we don't have to have a grant application back to the state until January 14th. So there's some wiggle room in there. We'd probably want to get your approval on this thing before the end of November and get it submitted to DEQ so that and this is provided you guys want to go forward with a second round of grants, and we're going to talk about that. We'll want to be able to say that we've done that we've got an approved PER from the town, and it's been submitted to DEQ. No guarantee that DEQ will have enough time and actually review and approve it, but at least we can say it's been submitted to them.
Right. So. Mr. Ludington?
I think having scored 83 out of 140 is a pretty good indication that I think we're very competitive with what we want to try to do. I think being able to have something that we've submitted to DEQ as a preliminary engineering report is pretty important in that, because of course everybody else is thinking the same thing, that they scored pretty high, and now we got the ones that were eminently failing out of the way, and we can go after something else. So I really think that we need to try to approve something tonight that this is the direction that we want to go. I think that this makes sense to me. I think we've got, of course, there's going to be some hurdles in all of this, trying to figure out where we're going to put the tank, what kind of tank, what the tank is really doing, the existing tank is really doing, and the disruption of replacing water mains in town. In my history, I've had some experience in replacing water mains in town, and it's a big hole, which is not always the greatest way to go. But I think that that's important for the town. I think that we certainly are taking advantage of the issue of the amount of water that we have available to us, and that we need to try to clean up a lot of these leaks. We're sending a significant amount of potable water, treated water, to the river. So I think that we need to try to fix that. And we also need to try to prepare ourselves for, as the town grows, that we need to be in a good position to provide water in case of fire. So that's my recommendation at this point, is that we would approve something tonight and see a draft as soon as HDR is able to put something together.
Okay. One thing I think we can touch on real quick in the main replacement pieces is that we're proceeding. What the costs include are installing a meter pit at the curb stop of every home and every parcel along that road, so that In these areas where this leakage is occurring, a lot of those properties, their meter is in their crawl space, which is basically bypassing any leakage in their service. And we know we have services all over town leaking. We just can't pinpoint them. And all of that water is unmetered. So we'd like to move meters out to the street in a curb or in a meter pit, so that any leakage that's occurring between the home and as close to the main as we can get it is being metered. It will certainly incentivize folks to repair their services, which they own. And it would also allow us to capture exactly what water is being leaked and know that, where the loss is. We feel that a large portion of the millions of gallons that we're leaking is in those services. When we did the leak count for the GIS mapping over the last 3 years, 2 of the leaks that we repaired were related to mains. All of the other 28 were services that blew off the main. So we know that that's an issue. So those improvements are included in the cost of replacing the mains. So with that, does the council have any further insight or input on the direction we move in? With regards to just the PER, where we'll get to the grant funding next.
Well, I think it's obvious that we paid some attention to what the public has said about fixing the leaks.
Mm-hmm.
Most people that I talk to about this are amazed at how much water that we're leaking, and I'm one of those people that has an old service. I'm sure it's leaking. I stick a shovel in the ground every spring to see if I can get water to perk up, and it hasn't yet, but that doesn't mean that it's not all going down. So I think that that's something that's important for us, is to try to repair those leaks, and that I can tell there's been a significant amount of work done in that heat map to find out where a lot of those leaks are occurring. So I don't think that we're that far off on trying to fix that stuff. It's not a significant amount of time that or disruption that you have when you have to replace a service line to the main as they're going down and working on that kind of stuff. So it's actually pretty easy. When they were working on 3rd Street, that actually went pretty quickly for those people that got new service. It went pretty fast. They were ready to put everything in and connect everything up, and it goes pretty quick. So.
I don't feel like we have a justified reason to not move forward with making a decision. We've already been here.
Sure.
There's a couple changes, but it's very unjustified if we don't.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion from the council to approve the changes to the preliminary engineering report so we can proceed to submittal to DEQ.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Ludington and seconded by Ms. Devlin to proceed with the changes to the PER for submittal to DEQ. Any further council discussion? Is there any public comment? Ms. Rodaboff, if you step to the podium, please. You can't, though, because no one can hear you online.
I'm kind of confused a little bit about what a meter pit is.
It's a...
Is that all the meters from a block or something in a big conglomeration? Or?
No, so it's a very small manhole in front of your residence near the street. That contains it's a tube that goes into the ground where your meter is located. So any new construction since 2012, 2015 has a meter pit, and meter pit is individual to
Okay.
your property.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further public comment? Okay. Hearing no other public comment, we'll call for the vote. Ms. Berthoud?
Councilmember Allen.
Aye.
Councilmember Devlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington.
Aye.
Councilmember Wandler.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. We will now move on to new business item B, which is discussion decision on the American Rescue Plan Act infrastructure funding round 2 priorities. So I'll hand it back over to Craig, and he can explain from this standpoint where we're going.
All right, let's move to the next slide. And I'll try to make this first slide fairly quick. But as you recall, the American Rescue Plan Act, there are 3 buckets of money. There's U.S. Treasury funds. The town received $529,000 plus in Treasury funds, 50% to be paid in June of 21, 50% to be paid in 22. And just to touch on this, the last time we discussed this, you guys made a decision to use half of that money for things other than the water system, which is totally appropriate and within the boundaries of the use of that money. The second bucket of money is minimum allocation grant money, and the town of Stevensville received almost $328,000 for that. An application, you have to apply for that money. Those applications are accepted all the way through January 14th, 2023. There's a 1-to-1 match with that. You can use the Treasury money to match that. And then there's the competitive grant program, and that's really what we're here to talk about. As we discussed, we were not successful in round 1 in getting competitive grant money. Round 2 is underway right now with applications accepted up till January 14th, 2022, and the maximum amount of those grants is $2 million per grant applicant or project, and again the match is 1-to-1. And the ranking for those 1-to-1 is the most points you can get. So if you want $1 million in grant money through the competitive grant process, you have to provide $1 million to get the maximum number of points for that part of the ranking. And you can use the Treasury money and the minimum allocation money to do that. So competitive grant criteria, let's just go to that next slide because this is important, and we can talk a little bit about where we think we were off a little bit last time and why we're updating the PER. One of the reasons we're updating the PER is to better align ourselves with the program and be more competitive with the grants. So the criteria for the grants, number 1 is human health and safety. That's the most points. We are not going to rank well on human health and safety because, as I said before, we don't have any violations. Nobody's, we haven't had any fecal coliform hits, or we don't have arsenic, we don't have lead, we don't have any of those things in the water. So we just don't rank well there. But I think that criteria is not going to be as important this time. There aren't going to be that many people that have those sorts of issues anymore because they probably got funded in the first round. They can't come back again. Affordability is another one. You guys are going to rank really well on the affordability side of that because your rates right now for water and sewer meet the target rates set by Department of Commerce. If they were really low, they'd say, well, you need to raise your rates and pay for your own stuff. That's not the case here, so that's a really good thing. We're in good shape there. Readiness to proceed. I'm standing here because you've already selected your engineer. We're going to submit a PER to DEQ. Those are good things. We're going to talk a little bit about next steps and what we do between now and January 14th to improve our readiness to proceed score, and we can do that. And then the other one is conservation and resilience to climate change, and repairing leaks and reducing the amount of lost water in the system is important, and that fits that criteria very well. So I think we'll rank pretty well there. And I've gotten big words there, no fire flow improvements. So when we kind of went around and around with the state on this because we had the new tank in there. There were several reasons that we had the new tank in there. One was the old tank is leaking and it's really old. The other part of it is we're trying to improve fire flow. What's a little bit convoluted with all this is when you go to build a new tank, DEQ requires that you build it to meet fire flow. But they don't want to fund that, so whatever. Anyway, So we're what we need to do if you guys are on board with us going forward with the round 2 grant application is we need to make this about conservation, leakage, renewal and replacement, and not about fire flow. And we can certainly do that. Let's go to the next slide. So what I did was I looked at, and this just recaps the money that's available through this program for you guys. Minimum allocation grant money, $328,000. Treasury funds, $265,000. The town has approximately, and Brandon can correct me if I'm wrong or update this, approximately $1.6 million in the water fund to do capital improvements to the system. And then, as we said earlier, the competitive grant program, you could get up to $2 million in grant money from the program. That's the cap. That's the most. Let's move down to the next one. So if we look at all the phase 1 projects that I showed you before, we've got the existing tank condition assessment. That would definitely fit the ARPA program. Existing tank rehabilitation would fit the ARPA program. The new tank will not. And I'll caveat that a little bit. So here's the thing. If we go in and we do the condition assessment, we say, your existing tank is shot. Forget it. You're not going to rehabilitate this thing, demo it and start over. Now, if we were going to demo that tank and build another tank right there, that's the same size. We're not increasing the size for fire flow. I think that would fit the criteria for the ARP grant program. So that's a good thing. We'll ferret that out as we go through this condition assessment. My recommendation is that we build a new tank, a second tank, somewhere, probably on the other side of the system, so that we have redundancy. So that, right now we're in a situation where if there's something wrong with that existing tank and we feel like it's, we've done tests and it's significantly leaking, to repair it, it's extremely difficult. So to take it off service, we have to run the whole system off of pressure from the wells. You don't have any fire, you have a significantly diminished fire protection, and it's not easy to do. So if we had to demo that tank and start over on that site, I think we should do it, and we should try to get money for that. But you should use town funds to go build another tank, as you were planning to do. It could be smaller. It could be the 600,000 range or $500,000 range instead of the million range that we were talking about before. So, sorry, that's a really long, convoluted caveat to that. We're not going to solve this tonight, but we are going to solve this. And we're going to come up with a plan that really works well for you guys. So keep that in mind. But just going out and building a new tank somewhere wouldn't fit the ARPO program, and we found that out the last time. SCADA system improvements would fit the ARPO program, and obviously Pine Street main replacement, Mission Street main replacement would fit the program. So let's go on to the next slide. So to look at how, and this is one scenario, and we're going to massage this and get to something that works, like I said. Definitely recommend that we do the condition assessment on the tank as soon as possible. We use that to really narrow in on the existing tank rehabilitation cost, and whether we're talking about minor repairs or whether we're talking about a complete tank replacement. We need to come to a conclusion on that. But we've got a placeholder in there, $300,000, that's probably middle of the road. SCADA system improvements, Pine Street, Mission Street, total phase 1 project cost, just under $1.7 million. So when you look at how the funding sources might work, you could use your minimum allocation grant money, your treasury funds, around $250,000 in town funds out of the $1.6 million that we said we had. If you add all that up to match a grant, your competitive grant would be almost $840,000. That would pay for the phase 1 projects under this in town funds to go build a new tank. Now, you may say, okay, let's put a little bit more money to main replacement. Let's, we can rearrange the beans as we move forward, and I don't think we're asking you to decide on this right now. We're just saying we need to figure it out. If you want to go for round 2 grant funds, I think you'd rank pretty high. I think you'd do pretty well. And we'll come back to you before we submit that grant with exact numbers on what we recommend that you do once we've done condition assessment and figured out the tank issues. Let's go to the next slide. So just recommendations moving forward, definitely recommend that you utilize the minimum allocation grant funds, the treasury funds, and town funds to leverage competitive grant money. I think you'd rank pretty well. That grant is due January 14th, and that is going to include some combination of tank rehabilitation, water main replacement, and SCADA system upgrades. I'm recommending that you proceed with condition assessment of the existing water tank as soon as possible, and do a siting/alternative selection of a new tank to better define those costs and refine this plan. And then once we've got those things figured out, we can decide, do we add additional water main replacements or not? So probably maybe even hopefully as soon as your next council meeting, I'm going to have given Brandon a contract amendment to do those things, to proceed with the condition assessment and the siting selection. The other one that I maybe want a little feedback from you guys on is I think we know we want to do Pine Street and Mission Street. For the readiness to proceed part of this, we could include in that contract amendment getting started on design of those things. If we had designs submitted to DEQ, I don't know that we can get them approved in time. That's a really short time period to try to design that stuff and get it approved. But even if we were proceeding with design of those improvements, I think that would help our readiness to proceed score as well. So I can include that in our contract amendment if you so desire. So I think what we're looking for is your direction on, do we go for phase 2 or a round 2 competitive grant application, and are you on board with a contract amendment to proceed with condition assessment, tank siting and alternatives, and design of the water mains?
Paul? I guess a couple clarifications for the public's benefit. SCADA is a computer system that operates the entire system, so it provides the ability for our operators to sit at a computer and monitor the entire system in one place rather than going from site to site. And this integration would integrate with the sewer system, so that right now if we have an issue with the reservoir or a well triggers some alarm for some reason, they have to go to that site right now to figure out what's going on with the computer. Under a SCADA upgrade, we would be able to monitor that from the sewer plant. We would be able to better integrate, and when call-outs and that sort of thing come out. So I just wanted the audience to know what SCADA means.
Supervisory control and data acquisition.
I didn't know that.
I usually don't remember that.
No.
Yeah, I didn't until just before when you said supervisory.
So with that, given everything that Mr. Caprera has kind of presented, we're looking to see if our priorities in terms of the leak repairs on Pine and Mission align with what the council wants us to do. It does appear, with the 1.2 million left over in town funds, that you could hypothetically throw maybe one more water main replacement project on there, or you may just contingently go with this plan and say, well, if in fact the water tank doesn't need quite the rehabilitation of $300,000, we want to redirect those funds towards water main replacement. So you have those options before you, and while the Public Works Department and Craig and I have met and kind of discussed what we think our priorities ought to be for this funding, we certainly want yours and the public's input into how we proceed. It's your system.
Well, first of all, I'd like to start off with saying that I would like to thank Craig and HDR for their continued commitment to the town. We've got a great history together and have done a lot of great utility upgrades and improvements with HDR in the town. That being said, I have no reason to second guess what his recommendations would be for the town. I think that we certainly need to, I think it's a priority for us to be able to assess the current condition of the tank, of the water tank that we have. I think no matter what, we need to be able to do that. I think that as I'm sitting here thinking about Pine Street and Mission Street, I'm thinking about how much water they're going to be standing in when they go to replace those mains, and think that, you know, there are probably going to be some costs in there that we're not anticipating, or maybe we are at this point, if we're thinking about what we're actually going to look at when we start doing stuff like that. Plus, we have to, when we were originally talking about this PR, we were looking at a couple of different alternatives for replacement of a new tank, and I think that we need to try to think about some redundancy and trying to figure out a good spot for us to place another tank. And I think that's gonna take some time, a little decision making on our point to try to figure out what we're gonna do and where we're gonna put it. I have no reason at this point to, like I said, to second guess anything that HDR is recommending for the town. We've never really had a serious issue, at least in my experience. So I would recommend that we, in fact, I'll put it in a motion. I will make a motion that we go after all the second round ARPA funds that we can possibly get to try to do as much water improvements with the town as possible.
A second.
It's been moved by Mr. Ludington and seconded by Ms. Devlin that we proceed with round 2 ARPA funding to the maximum availability that we can. To clarify, how does the town council feel about proceeding with contract amendments or task orders in order to facilitate some of that legwork up front? I think from my perspective, and Craig and I discussed this earlier, certainly going ahead with the condition assessment is vital in terms of getting the grant ready. But even going as far as designing some of those water main replacements, I think that's not money wasted when, regardless if we get ARPA or not, we're going to have to replace those mains. It's just a matter of who pays for it.
I see a big range of dates on this funding application. I think that they're probably as soon as, well, probably in some between Thanksgiving and Christmas, they're going to be looking at some of the applications that they already have and trying to rank some of those. I would hate to see us get held up by waiting for design. If we think that we can add some design to this application, that would be great. But I'm not sure you can get DEQ approval before we're heading into that time of year where, as we all know, once you hit Thanksgiving, things slow to a sputter governmentally. So I'm not sure that we'll be able to accomplish what we need to accomplish. But if you think it's worth a shot, Craig, then I think we might be able to go for it.
I think my only thought on that is we might score a few more points if we say we are under design. Because I agree with you. I don't think, first of all, I don't think I can get the design done in time
Right.
by January 14th, let alone get it to DEQ and have them approve it. But we could say we're designing this stuff. We're moving forward on it.
You're at least tasked by the council. They've authorized a task order.
You
for
guys
to
are
design.
committed to designing and making those improvements to the system. It's one, you know, and again, it's probably, you know, get you a few more points.
The interesting thing about this scenario is we saw similar success with the airport. If you recall, the last two projects that we've been able to pull off at the airport over the last 4 or 5 years, the reason we were able to get those dollars from FAA was because those projects had been designed and were sitting on the shelf and just needed funding to implement. And if we can get the water system to a similar point, then I think, you know, ARPA or not, as funding opportunities come up for the system, we'll be in a better position. So I'm not hearing any objection to that. So I think we'll go ahead and pull together the documentation needed to bring to your next meeting so that you can bless that and have us proceed. Is that fair, Craig?
That's fair.
Great. Any further council discussion then on proceeding with the ARPA Round 2 application? Okay, is there any public comment? I'm sorry you're cold back there. They lock the thermostat on us, and it's set at 66. We'll move it along here. Hearing no public comment and no further discussion from the council, we'll proceed to vote. Ms. Berthoud.
Councilmember Allen.
Aye.
Councilmember Devlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington.
Aye.
Councilmember Wandler.
All right, that motion passes unanimously.
Thanks,
Craig.
guys.
Appreciate your time. All right. Moving on then to new business item C, discussion decision on the Main Street Program Grant Contract Amendment. Your agenda communication does speak a little bit to why this item is before you this evening. Just in brief, the town was awarded Montana Main Street Program funding in the amount of $10,000 about 2 years ago, just before the pandemic hit. And the funding was originally designated to investigate the feasibility or sustainability of a Main Street program in Stevensville. And it was really a response to the Stevensville Main Street Association's closure. The pandemic hit, priorities got blurred. We kind of set this project on the back burner. However, Department of Commerce is anxious to get the money spent, and if we don't spend it, no one will, is what I'm told by them. So this funding, if we don't spend it, doesn't go to another project sitting in someone else's hopper in another community. It just doesn't get spent and goes into a much larger pot of money. So they really wanted to see Stevensville benefit from this funding. They asked about what kind of things we were doing in the works and that sort of thing, talked about eligible projects. The growth policy happened to be one of those eligible projects that we're embarking on under the Planning and Zoning Board's work plan later in 2021, early 2022 to really get underway. So what we discussed with the Department of Commerce was the idea of shifting that funding and doing a contract change to use that to hire a consultant to help drive the growth policy revisions that need to happen, with the emphasis that through the Planning and Zoning Board's conversations, there has been an emphasis and some credit given to the Stevensville Main Street Association for the accomplishments that did get done in the 2016 growth policy. When you inventory the accomplishments of that policy and what we were able to accomplish since 2016, a lot of credit goes back to SMSA because they were able to facilitate a lot of that work on the town's behalf. So with that, the planning board felt that there was some merit to further discussing a Main Street program and its role in the community, and so this ties in with that contract amendment you have before you. So upon approval of this amendment, if you so choose to do so, we would advertise an RFP for professional services to get a consultant on board to help us facilitate the rest of the process with the growth policy.
I remember when the Main Street Association had kind of their last meeting, so to speak. It was actually at the Stevensville Playhouse, and it was suggested to apply for this grant. So that my assumption and my understanding of it was that the downtown businesses here on Main Street still would have the the possibility of a group that would be advocating for them.
Sure.
And I know Loie this is kind of something that she's been passionate about. What you're asking, I guess, is the complete intent of what the grant was created for.
It's another way to get there. Yeah.
Exactly. This was the purpose. So I would make a motion, definitely, to move forward.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. It's been moved by Ms. Devlin and seconded by Ms. Allen to move forward with the contract amendment for the Main Street Program grant. Further discussion? Mr. Ludington.
I think that the Planning and Zoning Board has had a really busy year. I think that this is something that kind of made everybody have a big sigh of relief if we could try to get somebody to come in and help us do this for the town. I mean, it's time for it to get done again. So I think that we need to look at this seriously as to being able to move the town forward. I think it's a great idea.
Okay, any further council discussion? Any public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Ms. Berthoud.
Councilmember Allen.
Aye.
Councilmember Devlin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington.
Aye.
Councilmember Wandler.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item of business on the council's agenda is discussion decision on a selection of a broker or broker firm to enter into a professional services contract with the town to supply real estate services. This endeavor relates back to the Willoughby property sale. And to clarify, at the previous meeting, there was some public comment and dialogue, if you will, or statement about an adjacent property owner having a first right of refusal on the property, and that we didn't offer that to that individual. And because it's public property, we're not in a position where we can just offer a right of first refusal to someone. You know, this is the public's property; they own it. And just like when we sell used computer equipment and office chairs, we have to make sure it goes through a fair process of that it's available to anyone who wants to purchase it. So that's why we didn't go down the right of first refusal, although it is encouraging to hear that there is interest in the property potentially. In order to facilitate and make sure that that property is fairly marketed and that we navigate the proper procedures in selling it, we went forward with asking for statements, qualifications, and proposals from real estate firms in the area. We received 3 responses to that RFP to provide those services. Those 3 firms were Eichert Realty, Engel and Volkers of Stevensville, and Exit Realty, Bitter Valley of Stevensville. Their proposals are included in your packet. We did a very, very rough, simple breakdown on the first page of your packet there, so you could kind of see the comparison between the 3 firms, just based on the some of the criteria that was included in the RFP. However, because there's only 3 of these proposals, ordinarily we might narrow this down for you and just bring back 1 recommendation, but there were only 3. We wanted you to provide the input. We know that this is to some degree a hot button issue for some in the community, so we wanted to do this as openly and transparently as possible. So tonight you can discuss the merits of each firm if you'd like, and provide direction to the administration as to how you'd like to proceed. You may even go as far as to selecting a firm and telling us that this is the firm you want to contract with, and authorizing us to go ahead and proceed in that direction. Or we can go to the hardware store and get a for sale sign and put it on the fence post, but I'd prefer go this route.
Are we in process of getting an appraisal?
Not yet. We wanted a realtor on board first.
So I guess that's where I'm stuck. It looks like the commission rates are all similar, 5% split if a dual agent was offered by Jotsis, but there's a stark difference between Exit Realty. What? A big difference. So $345,000 as a high compared to $190,000 as a high from ICERT. To clarify, exit says $345,000. And then the suggested is $285,000, which would be great. But I guess I would like more information on how that, how those numbers came
Well,
to be.
Fortunately for you folks, you have two of the three here. And if they're willing to speak to that philosophy as to how you came to those numbers, we can entertain that. You guys want to do rock, paper, scissors? You do have to use the microphone, Kim, because the folks online won't hear you. That's okay, no problem. It happens all the time.
Hi, I'm Kim Lindman with Exit Realty. We did come up with this comparison based on a current market analysis that was actually with properties that were recently sold that were similar, and it is included in the proposal. There are variables that may not have been included in terms of, like, are there water rights, are there this, are there that, and I didn't research. I don't believe there is. I did research, and I don't believe that there's anything that stood above. But the price per acre, again, it's a computer analysis that comes up with a what do you call it, average value of price per acre.
Thanks, Kim. Sure, Heidi, come on up. Oh, you'll have to turn it on. Yeah. There you go.
Heidi Stahl, real estate broker with Engel Volkers. I was at my kids' soccer games. Sorry. I spent a lot of time looking at comparable properties. So the property that I put on my proposal was the property. I had a drone fly over it. And, it's kind of a high and dry property. I looked at irrigated acreage. I looked at high and dry. This doesn't have water rights that I could tell. So I think that realistically it is like 169, 165, maybe 189 to test the market, but I don't think it's anything higher than that. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
It's okay.
Anyways, I did different analysis as far as like what acreage sold for, if they had irrigation, if it had improvements. When I was looking at the properties, I took the properties that had, either a well or septic approval, because I don't think this has septic approval, and I kind of took those out of the mix so that the properties that I used in mine were actually comparable to the subject property.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You may just make sure you speak into the mic.
I just wanted to add, when you look at 5 acres or 6 acres, to put it in perspective, I just had 1.5 acres listed at 165. So it really does, when you look at the numbers and look what's on the market, and the values of what has sold, you'd be surprised, and that's why my number is way higher.
Thank you. Now you know why you're making this decision.
The good news is it's a profit no matter what. From what, $23?
$23 we have on the property. Yeah.
What do you think concerning the word that we got that the seller to us has the first option to get it? Is there anything in the records?
No. So we did a very, very, very thorough search of the annex building and every file we own. And as you may be aware, the past practice up until town clerk Stacy Bartlett was that when a clerk left, we rolled their cabinet over to the annex building behind a locked door, and we bought the new clerk a new cabinet. That's how we handled a transition in clerks. We don't do that anymore, but it made finding or looking for the Willoughby file, as they called it, a little easier because we could just simply go to a certain filing cabinet or a set of filing cabinets and look. We looked through filing cabinets upon boxes and found no Willoughby file. The only thing we could find is a deed to the property in the safe. We did a search through IDOC, which is a system that we use to access the county's records on things that have been filed on a property, and there was nothing filed that we could find. Of course, we'll put more energy into a complete title search on that property when the time's appropriate to do that. But there's no indicators right now that there are any restrictions on that property whatsoever to the town of Stevensville. Mr. Ludington.
I guess at this point I'm interested in the town not having property that they're not going to use, not owning property that they're not going to use. I think it's an opportunity for us to be able to say that we had some property that we had potential to be used and that it's no longer necessary. I don't know if any of you have driven out to where this is at, but in my opinion, it's a desert. It's high, it's dry, it's rocky. My feeling is that if there is someone who is interested in buying this property so that they would have property, I think that we ought to try to see what the market will bear, and be glad that we don't have surplus property anymore.
It was well noted in the last meeting that we're not taking care of this property, and I don't think that that's a good reputation for the town of Stevensville to have, is to be a poor steward of land it owns. So if we're not going to use it and we're not going to take care of it, I just assume not have it.
I've talked to people who have dealt with this previously, and they said that it was originally purchased for the gravel, and the gravel is not usable because there's too much clay and other stuff within it. I think if someone has been in there and used it, it was just because it was there and they were driving by.
In terms of the town having its own gravel source, we have a better source of gravel at our airport than we do on this property, when we have a lot more acreage there as well. In fact, other government entities in Ravalli County have contacted the town and expressed interest in opening a gravel pit on our property at the airport. We've not pursued that based on agendas and not being able to really fully vet that, but there was concern voiced that we would lose a gravel source to the town of Stevensville, and there's a reason why we get our gravel and our road sand specifically from Ravalli County and not from this acreage.
The history that I discovered was that at this particular time the town was working on water and sewer. They needed bedding material. They had an opportunity from somebody who knew somebody that was working on the project, that they knew of a spot where somebody had some acreage that they weren't using for anything else, wasn't good pasture, wasn't croppable, that the town might be able to get a hold of to have a source for gravel and dirt to backfill for water and sewer lines that they were putting in at the town at that particular time. That was the opportunity that came forward. Since that time, we have not really done any of this type of work ourselves, except in minimal amounts, working on fixing leaks and that sort of thing. And the requirements for that type of material have changed. So you can't just go out and dig up something and put it in a hole. You have to be able to say what it is and where it came from. So I think even if we wanted to try to be able to use this property as it was originally intended, we wouldn't really have a use for it. The soil or the gravel or dirt that came off of it, we really wouldn't be able to use it. And as the mayor said, we have paid little or no attention. I mean, I had to search through a couple of different people who have been here a long time before I found somebody who, oh yeah, I remember that long time ago that we had that. And I've been involved with the town since 2000. I didn't know we had it.
We're not sure we have a key to the gate. The gate's locked. We don't have a key. If that's any indicator. I think from that juncture, we've pretty well, hopefully for the public's benefit, vetted the merits behind why we're willing to dispose of this property. So the decision before you this evening is, who do you want to facilitate the sale of that property on the town's behalf?
This is really hard, but treating it like a contract, whether you agree with it or not, we would go with the least expensive. It would make the most sense to go with the most expensive. Who could get us the most money? I mean, that's what would seem to make the most sense in my mind. So I would make a motion to select Exit Realty Kim Lendman to provide real estate services to the town and enter into a professional services contract.
Is there a second?
That
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Allen and seconded by Mr. Ludington to select Exit Realty, Kim Lindman, as a broker firm to enter into a professional services contract for real estate services. Further council discussion? Is there any public comment? Okay, Ms. Stahl?
I just wanted to make sure that, everybody had an opportunity to actually go through the proposal and look at the comps to verify those prices, because I spent a considerable amount of time looking through actual what is realistic. I went through what is actively on the market. What can you get for $199? What can you get for $225? What's the market, what's the market doing? So not always is the highest price the most realistic price. So I just would encourage to spend some time looking through my proposal, to look through the properties, see why I selected those, see what days on market, how long have they been on the market for, what did they sell for. That's my last little bit.
Thank you. The proposals were included in your packet. I do have them here if you want to see them in living color, but they were included in your packet, so hopefully you had a chance to look at those over the last 7 days that they've been in there. So the other thing I'll mention, I'll take this opportunity to speak to, is the caliber of proposals that the town has received in the last couple of rounds of proposals that we've sent out. We just did a RFQ on a transportation plan. I think Mr. Ludington will speak to later in the meeting. But certainly these three proposals blew me away and was not anything I expected. So kudos to you ladies for the effort that you put into these proposals. They were certainly thorough. I can't say that I enjoyed reading them because it's dry, but it's property. But nonetheless, they were very well put together and professional. And so I do appreciate it. Wasn't anything what I expected in terms. I didn't know what to expect, frankly, but it wasn't this. So well done. Regardless of whatever outcome the town council selects there, we appreciate what you did in terms of this proposal, and I think that certainly this council would consider that going forward if there were another opportunity forward. So thank you. Any further council discussion or public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead. Oh, Ms. Yes, we're going to call for the vote, because that's why I asked for public comment. The motion on the floor is to select Bitterroot Valley Exit Realty with Kim Lindman. Okay, Hearing nothing further, we'll call for the vote. Ms. Berthoud.
Councilmember Allen,
Aye.
Councilmember Devlin,
Aye.
Councilmember Ludington,
Aye.
and Councilmember Wandler.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. The council's business then is concluded. We'll move into the executive report, and I'll be very brief. Because anything I have to report on, I think Mr. Ludington will report on under board comments. I think the only thing I want to cover, we covered the preliminary engineering report. I'll be brief. Other than our fifth Friday meetings tomorrow, throughout the day, we have a pretty extensive agenda that we're going to work through that'll talk a little bit about risk management. Hopefully it'll inspire some of our employees as well in other areas. Overall, it's a pretty solid agenda, and that's available on the posted board on Town Hall posting board. The other thing I'll just ask folks is we do have an election coming up, and it's time to vote. All registered voters received, active registered voters that is, received their ballots in the mail a few weeks ago. Best practice is to get those in the mail by tomorrow in order for those to get to the election office in time. If you did not receive a ballot and you want to vote and you're eligible to vote, then contact the elections office. Late registration for voter registration ends on Monday at noon. If you go in past Monday at noon, they will not take your registration and you will not vote in this election. So I think as of last night, we were at like 39% turnout, which is actually relatively decent for a municipal election alone, not having a federal ballot sent out. Although it could be better. So, again, we just want to encourage folks to vote. Either way, however they vote, great. That's all I have. Town council comments? Mr. Ludington?
I'll kind of mirror what the mayor said and say that there is no place local for you to drop off your ballot.
Correct.
You have to take it if you don't put it in the mail and don't think it'll make it there on time. You need to take it to Hamilton, to the elections office in person.
Any further council comments? Board reports. Mr. Ludington.
Okay, as I said earlier, the Planning and Zoning Board has been extremely busy this year, and I am super proud of them for the hard work that they have done. They have done, like I said, they've done a lot of work. We are more or less ready to present to the council a draft of subdivision regulations, all 122 pages of it. And I expect you to read it.
63,000 words.
Because I've read it several times. I will also probably at that time have some highlights for the council to look at, that some things that we paid particular attention to. So look forward to that at the next meeting. The other thing that we talked about last night at the Planning and Zoning was requests for proposals for qualifications for a transportation master plan. And as Brandon suggested, this completely blew me away. It is actually put together by two engineering firms. Robert Pecha and Associates out of Helena and HDR in Missoula went together, which engineering firms hardly ever do. They hardly ever will decide they want to work together to try to put something together for the town. This is something that, the last one is from 2006 and was done by a member of the Public Works Department and an engineer, and they probably spent, 4.5 hours driving around looking at it and mapping out things. So it's not very inclusive. That this is also something that will be coming forward to the council. Will be a contract for a transportation master plan. Don't really have an idea what it will, as far as what it's going to cost. I don't think it's going to be overly expensive, but I also think that it's something that we need desperately to try to be able to plan for what's going to happen next. At this point, we really don't know what's going to happen next. I think this is something that is very important for us. And as I said, it's a very inclusive proposal, stating a lot of their qualifications. They've done a lot of work all over the state, transportation-wise, on just about every type of road that you can imagine. So I think that if we can get something like this from this caliber of engineering firm, that we'll get something that we'll be able to show everybody else.
Any other board reports? Okay. Well, with that, we'll adjourn our meeting. And, oh, before you leave, please do sign the claim sheet. We're back to that business. So we won't, instead of interrupting our meeting in the middle of the meeting after you approve claims, just make sure before you leave after every meeting that you check out with Wendy or Janelle and sign that claim sheet. Aside from that, thanks for your time this evening. You got a lot of great work done, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.